You're listening to the Youth for Life podcast with Michelle Baum, Director of Y for Life at Lutherans for Life, where we prepare youth to be gospel-motivated voices for life. Be sure to stick around after today's live recording of our Chats for Life program to find out how you can be live too on our next Youth for Life podcast. Welcome to Chats for Life. This evening we get to talk to two missionaries instead of one. It's like bonus night. Welcome to all of you. Our guests tonight are Pastor Lawson, who was, I think he'll tell us the story, but was serving in Russia and has since landed in another country, at least temporarily. And then we also have Hayden Rensner, who is here from the Czech Republic. So they're going to speak to us about their mission work and how they uphold the lives of the people God sends into their path. Let's open with prayer. I think Pastor Lawson is going to lead us in prayer, and then we'll have a quick question.
Okay. Heavenly Father, we lift up to you our hearts and our needs as we meet together tonight, as we hear about your word, as it goes about the world, and as it reaches those who are in desperate need. Remind us of why we are called to be your children, and we pray these spoken words and those unspoken in our hearts. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right. Well, I did ask one of you before we began, but now that more of you are here, how many of you have ever thought about doing mission work? Excellent. Okay, so we've got some hands up. All right, so you'll have some interest. And then when you think of mission work, right, what do you think mission work might entail? What sort of things would you envision missionaries doing?
So this is from what I heard, because my parents were missionaries. My mom was a missionary in Russia, and both my parents were missionaries in Germany. And they kind of had like a more broad variety of stuff that they would do. So my mom's job when she was in Russia was to teach English. So not exactly something like when you think missionary, like teaching English isn't exactly like the first thing that comes to mind. Obviously that comes into it. And then my parents did like pastoral and their deaconess work. But my dad will talk about all the time is how like being a missionary isn't just outside of the United States. It's in your neighborhood with your neighbors and your peers. And they can look like pretty much anything. There's plenty I know who are like nurses and doctors too. But as long as you're, bringing the gospel to people in whatever way you can.
All right. Anyone else want to add to that? I like the word variety. I think we'll hear about variety tonight. Any other ideas? Well, we'll go ahead and get started then. Pastor Lawson, if you want to start us off and talk to us first, we would love to hear from you.
Sure. Let me actually going to share my screen and kind of pulled out stuff that I had done before. And here we go. So this is where I was working up until about 2 months ago. I was in St. Petersburg, Russia, and I was working with the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Ingria in Russia. And just to kind of give you an idea, prior to where St. Petersburg is, this area had been under control of the Swedes. It was part of a Swedish empire. And where you see in red, that was Ingria land. And going back probably about the 16th century, this area had become Lutheran when Sweden became an independent Lutheran church. And so all this area became Lutheran. And in particular, this area is Ingria land became Lutheran, and they actually formed or about 1611. So about early 1700s, Peter the Great comes in and claims the area for Russia, and he decides to put his new capital in the center of this, and he builds his city, St. Petersburg. And the rest becomes the center of government for Tsarist Russia up until 1917. Prior to the revolution, Lutheranism was actually one of the largest Christian religions in Russia. It's the second largest after Orthodoxy. we're talking millions of members in Russia. It was 50% of St. Petersburg was Lutheran before, was the largest Protestant denomination in the city. And 50% of the population was Lutheran. A lot of notable Russian people in their history were Lutheran. The architect who built the Winter Palace for the Tsars, the original architect was a Lutheran and member of St. Anne's Lutheran Church there in the city, which is the oldest Lutheran church. And the Fabergé family, the jeweler family that made those eggs for the Tsars, the Fabergé eggs, they were members of St. Anne's. In fact, they were quite instrumental in building a lot of the parochial schools. So this is post-revolutionary. Anyhow, also, if you're into Russian literature, the Russian writer Boris Pasternak talks about in his biography, and it's autobiography or his writings, of growing up in Moscow and going to Lutheran parochial school until the 8th grade. So there's a lot of influence of Lutherans in Russia in that. But at post-revolution, churches were closed, buildings were turned into municipal buildings. One in St. Anne's in particular, where I had a lot of association with, because that was where the English language service was held, was turned into a movie theater. In fact, the chapel had been used as a bar during the Soviet period. 80,000 of the Ingrians in particular had been executed during this time because they have ties to Finland, Finnish links, and that Stalin had thought they were enemies. Those who weren't really executed, others were arrested, deported to Siberia, which led to a lot of their churches eventually being founded in Siberia in the Far East, which they still now have to this day. They would continue to meet in secret during the Soviet period. And this picture on the left is actually one of the areas they used to meet in the village, Kolbano, just outside of St. Petersburg. And it's near where the seminary was that I worked with. And what's funny is all around it, this is a cemetery. It's kind of hard to tell, but if you were to walk through the plants and all that, you would see these metal crosses and so forth. But they would actually meet in this spot during that time. And during COVID, when like everyone else, we had to go through a period where things were closed, they actually would, to avoid being seen by the government agents, making sure people were following policies, they would actually meet back in this place to hold worship to get around COVID policies. In the 1950s, they were allowed to return back to Russia, to this area from exile after Stalin's death. And by the 1970s, they were allowed to reform their congregation, so part of a toleration. The problem then is when the Soviet Union was no more, and they were allowed to go back and worship freely, in that there was not enough pastors, and they're still struggling to have enough pastors. So there's been a huge focus on developing church workers. This is the seminary that I worked at. They actually call it a theological institute. And the Missouri Synod actually helped build this back about 30 years ago. It's out in a village called Kolbano. It's a historic Finnish church. And so that was the main school, but it was more than that. So this is a typical class. You had guys there studying to be pastors. It's a 4-year type program. They'll do a couple years of schooling in classroom, and then they'll go out and they'll serve like as a vicar. They'll call it a deacon. They'll make them a deacon, and they'll serve a congregation as a deacon, but continue education by coming back to the school for intensive courses, or they go back. And most of the time when I was there, I was teaching long gospel, and then Luther's thought. It was a kind of on the readings of Luther and how he developed his theology, and then long gospel, ecclesiology, how's the church, and then I did an Old Testament course on the wisdom books, and that's what I did in the school. But I also did a lot of I would go out and help with seminars and do pastoral care. But there was also women there. Women would come to serve, they would study, and they would do pretty much a similar program as the pastors, but they would go and they would work as deaconesses in the churches, working youth groups or a lot of, they have a lot of social welfare, social programs that they deal with. They have halfway houses for prisoners. When you leave a prison, a lot of times there's nowhere to go. So they would, so the Ingrian Lutheran Church had homes for these guys to go to make sure, because they had a certain time they had to be in a place, in a house, and they had to have employment within a certain time frame. And if they didn't, they would go back to prison. And the Ingrians would help with this process because it's not an easy process. So they had things like that and programs. This is at a seminar. That's actually me on the left up in the front. This is the church in Yoshkar Ola, one of the churches along the Volga in the Volga Valley. And it was for a church retreat. There were several groups that had come in from different churches that were spending time there, and they brought in members of the churches. And I don't remember what the topic was, but this was part of that presentation, Yoshkar Ola. Because we had an English service, sometimes the pastor would have to leave and so forth. And so I would fill in. This is in the chapel that they have there. The Ingrians follow a lot of the traditional patterns of the Finns. This is the main Russian service. I'll explain a little bit of why the church kind of looks like it does. But I would go in and help with the service. This is actually with an ordination of a deacon. The gentleman in the center is the bishop of the Ingrian Church, Ivan Laptev. And get called in. I did English club. They did a lot of outreach, and this was a very popular activity in Russia because everyone has to take English in school. They start young. We're talking probably about 4th, 5th grade, and they take English until they graduate. And so people will come to the to English clubs just to practice their English. So we had a lot of college students that would come and adults just because they wanted to improve themselves. So I'd help with that. And then one summer, last while, we actually went out a little bit. We used to do English clubs. We went through the Volga Valley. I think we did 5 churches in a month where they do these like mini camps, 3-4 days. And it's kind of an immersive program. And parents would send their kids and they would come. And we would do activities for 3 days, from practice writing. We would I think this section here, they had skits. They were doing plays in English, and they would put the plays on for other kids. And this is in a town, actually on the edge of the Urals, a place called Biersk. I think at this point we were probably about 100 kilometers from the Kazakhstan border. We were about that far east. These are my 2 daughters. I'm sitting here pointing and you can't see my hand, but the 2 older ones are my daughters. This was in Yoshkar Ola when we did the camp there, and we would play American style games, and this was actually well popular. Can you guess what game they're playing? So duck, go.
Yeah, duck, goose.
Duck, goose, yeah. And this is in Biersk again, and I think we're singing at this point. And then we would teach them games. And we did this, actually it was kind of dangerous at times. We were teaching them how to do basic baseball skills and teaching them to hit. And I don't think, so we had groups of people and they were learning to hit the baseball. And then this is the guy in the pirate outfit is one of the Russian pastors I worked with. Konstantin Subotin is his name. Kostya is what his nickname is. And they would do a treasure hunt on one of the days. So he would lead them, and they would do these puzzles in English, and then they would get the next puzzle. They would get the next clue to go on to the next puzzle on that. And so that's what he's doing there. We actually, at one point though, we were in a small town, and someone heard foreigners. And so the FSB came to check out to see why the foreigners were there. And he comes running out with his pirate outfit, talking to these FSB officers going, no, we're not, we're legit. And they were looking at our paperwork to make sure we had everything right. We were fine, but it was just funny him talking to them, and he's wearing this pirate up, and I think he had that point, he had an eye patch on. So this is St. Anne's Lutheran Church, Annenkirche. It was actually a German. In Russia, prior to the revolution, if you were Russian, you could not convert from Russian Orthodoxy. So most of the churches that were Lutheran tended to be ethnic. And if you were not so you were German Lutheran, or you were Ingrian or Estonian, Latvian, you would have all these, and they still named the churches by this. This was the German church. St. Mary's was the Finnish church, and you'd see these churches. But when the church was handed back to the communities, it caught fire, and the whole inside of the church was gutted. And because the building was built in the mid 18th century, the government repaired the other outside because it was historic, but they just never had the money to replace the inside. So everything was still burned out, and they were still using the church. They still use the church, but it's become this tourist attraction. And so they do art displays in there, and they have a growing church. When we first got there in 2019, the church was worshiping maybe 20 people were coming to church, and that when we left, they were over 150 because of the outreach program they were doing in that community. But they were a tourist center. They would be, if you looked at the 10 things to see in St. Petersburg, and St. Anne's was because of what it is. I think, is it Megadeth, or yeah, I think it was Megadeth actually used the church in the late 90s for a rock video they did at one point. This is actually another one of the churches in the Volga Valley that they have in Kazan. Kazan is actually a Muslim city, predominantly a Muslim city in the what they call the Tatarstan Republic. And this is one of those churches. Again, the church was started because of the deportations that Stalin had done, and so Ingrians had ended up in the city, and they established the church eventually. On the right is the kind of the interior, and so they use the Tatar kind of ornamentation to decorate the church because of that. And they do have Tatars who are now joining the church. This is the church in Moscow. It sits right, it was the old Lutheran chapel in the middle of the Lutheran cemetery in Moscow. And they were given the chapel back, but not the cemetery. So you have to walk through the cemetery to get to the church. And then this is the church out in Siberia in a place called Krasnoyarsk. We were probably about this point, we were north of Mongolia. That's how far east we were. And it's in an old warehouse factory kind of center. And they put together a congregation out in that church. So, and this is one of the things that they do. This is a memorial service they do. And the place is called Levashovo Cemetery. The Russians call it the wasteland. What it was during the purges in St. Petersburg, people would disappear off the street, and they would be taken down into the basements and executed by the KGB, or the NKVD at that point. And then at night, this truck would drive through to these different locations where they worked, and they would throw the bodies into the truck, and then they would take them out to this woodland. It's right in the north area of St. Petersburg, and they would dump them in these mass graves there. And it was an off-limit area until 1989. No one knew what was going on other than you didn't ask questions. And then it came out that it was a mass grave. They estimate, I think, 20,000 people were buried in this one grave. There's about 3 others in the area during what they call the Great Purge that went on. So October 31st in Russia is a national holiday to remember those who were persecuted and executed by the government, by the old Soviet regime. It's a national holiday. So they go out to the site, and they hold a worship service as a memorial worship service to those who on October 31st for that. And that's one of many things. They go out to another place in March to remember a church that literally disappeared. Russia is a very multi-ethnic area. It's surprising how varied it is. This is actually a Buddhist Datsun in St. Petersburg. There are lots of Buddhists in Russia, especially in central Russia, and they have these republics. And like I mentioned, there is a Muslim republic. There is actually a Buddhist republic in Russia. The main religion recognizes the official religion of that republic is Buddhism. So this is actually the church in St. Petersburg, the Datsun in St. Petersburg. Islam is very prevalent. The mosque on the right is the mosque in St. Petersburg. The one on the left is in the city of Kazan. It sits in the Kremlin, or their walled, the citadel. And then the largest, everywhere you'll see is Orthodoxy. Orthodoxy is the largest religion. There's some other smaller groups. Lutherans are present. You have the Armenian Orthodox Church, which is a different idea. But you have Armenians, and there are Roman Catholics. They're actually one of the smaller churches, and then you also have Baptist and Reformed churches, but they're very small in numbers. And then this is going to seem strange, but this is a pagan cemetery. Paganism is still practiced in Russia by sizable groups. In fact, there's an ethnic group of the Finno-Ugric people who live along primarily the Volga Valley and so forth. You'll hear names like Mariel and Ertzi and Mushka, and they all come from these Finno-Ugric people. They speak a language that's kind of predates Finnish and Hungarian, and a lot of them still practice these ancient pagan festivals with sacred groves. This is actually an area where the sacred grove is, and then these are the grave markers, and I'll go to a closer. And these are closer ones, and they put these like trees on the top with the ribbons. They're near the sacred grove. They're near a river. In the plot, you'll notice they're like pots and buckets and pans, and they put everything that they need in the afterlife is placed there on the grave. And so then they take, anyhow, so everything is there. And so in particular, the Mariel, there's a Mariel Republic, which is a pagan republic. Officially, the religion is paganism in this republic. And there are members of the church there. The Mariel actually make up the largest group in the church in Yoshkar-Ola, and Birsk is another area they were at. And one of the pastors I had met with my travels had actually been raised a pagan and had converted to Christianity and eventually became a pastor. I don't know, here's my cursor. This is the apartment building we lived on in St. Petersburg. Now I'm in Riga, which is in Latvia. And this is what I see a lot of now. I'm working with the Lutheran Academy. And I had been working with the Lutheran Academy before when I was in St. Petersburg, and I started teaching courses for them. And the Lutheran Academy is a project with the Latvian Lutheran Church and the Missouri Synod to provide theological training to men, and women are taken in just for their own study, but leading to the men who are leading to become pastors in areas where there's not many Lutherans and there are not many ability to go out and learn. So there are students from Pakistan to Africa and several in Europe, but this is kind of what you see when you lecture. So I was teaching a course for them on church history overview. And so that's what I started working with them. This is from our intensive. We just had Hayden was there. There's Hayden way in the back. Here's Hayden. She had come up for it, but this was a intensive we had where we had students coming from Romania. In the back here, I think we have another picture. Yeah, this is Davis here on the left. He came all the way from Malawi. So they're studying to be pastors. This is Davis's church in Malawi on Palm Sunday. He sent everyone pictures when he got back. This is the church in Romania. This is a baptism. The gentleman, the pastor here is the leader of the Romanian church. Soren Trifa is his name. But they're training new pastors and that. And this is Bahadir Argol. He's in Istanbul. He's part of the Turkish Lutheran Church. He's studying there. He serves as a pastor, but he's he's getting a formal theological training there. And the church they use actually belongs to the Armenian Catholic Church. They have 6 churches in Istanbul, but because of the declining numbers of Christians there, they're only using, I think, 3 of them, as he says, and so they rent this from them on Sunday mornings. But this is the church there in Istanbul. That's all I had. I tried to give you a synopsis. Hopefully, I didn't go too long or too much.
That's great. Let's just real quick and see if there are any questions specifically for Pastor Lawson before we transition to Hayden and her work. Do you have any questions? I have one. What would you say when we think about, life ministry and upholding lives? Obviously, you are upholding them with the gospel. You are bringing them to life eternal, right? And preparing pastors to do that. What are some practical things that the church is active in as well? You mentioned the prison ministry, basically the outreach to young, or older, to people that are transitioning out of prison. Are there any other life affirming ministries that the churches you've worked with have been part of?
Well, yeah, actually they are. They're very, abortion in Russia is devastating the population. They lost millions of people during the war. They lost people during the purges, and because of abortion and all the the loss of that, Russia has one of the lowest birth rates in Europe. I think it's like 1.3, 1.4 children is the average, and so they haven't outlawed it, but the government has said it's not good for the society. So the Lutheran Church in particular has set up several like centers for mothers or women and helping with those as alternatives to abortion. They've done a lot of work in that area and very active there. But at the same time, they've actually set up places for unwed mothers. They're very, very, very aware of social programs. And like I said, besides the prison ministry and the halfway houses and that, they've been doing a lot of healthcare, and they also do a lot of work for refugee care. There have been refugees that have been coming into Russia for quite a while. So they've always been proactive in those areas. I was looking for pictures, but I couldn't find them of the medical center. They actually also provide nursing care for seniors. In fact, the very first photo I had of the Lutheran Church was a Good Friday service at a nursing home just in the St. Petersburg area.
Thank you.
But in fact, and that's, as I mentioned, and that's where a lot of the deaconesses step in. A lot of the deaconess work in the social welfare, social care areas, more so than to say teaching in the church. You'll see them. They'll do youth, like I said, they'll do youth, but you'll see them doing a lot of the social care.
Yeah, both is needed. And so when we think of mission work, you've got teaching, you've got deaconess activity, the opportunity to hold lives in that way, and preaching, right? So when you showed us pictures, that spanned the entire basically range of Russia. Is that typical? Would you, when you are serving in Russia, would you go from place to place, or do you typically have a set foundation, like this is the church I normally serve, go out?
Well, they don't, they kind of, American pastors, we tend to move, I think the average is every 5-6 years now. And they find that kind of strange, because they see a call as a lifetime call. And the idea of moving to them doesn't, they'll pick up other responsibilities from where they're at, but they go to a church and they plan to be there for life, which is kind of, I guess, refreshing in that sense. But there's such a need though for pastors in areas that I know of guys who are in north central Siberia, and they're driving hours between congregations. There's in their congregations that may see their pastor once every 2 months or every two, because of the distances. So they have these groups. I don't know if that answers your questions, but they're sent in the calls. But well, they do have a calling, but they have an Episcopal system. So the bishop will say, I need someone here. But what they do is when they start a church or reestablish the church is a better way to say, there'll be a group there that will say something to the effect of, well, we have Lutheran ties. We know that our parents were Lutheran and we want to start a Lutheran church. And so they'll start there and they'll reach out and so a pastor will come and he will get them started, and they'll do Bible studies and they'll use internet training. And so then they'll start from there, and then they'll look to see who can be called as a pastor, and they'll help them go to school to train to be a pastor, and with the idea that he'll probably go back to serve that community. I should point out, one of the things we did was we actually did an English confirmation class for people who wanted to learn English, but also wanted to learn about the church. And the first time I heard this, it really struck me. I had heard the stories that during the Soviet period, grandmothers would baptize their kids in the sinks to make sure their kids were baptized. And I remember doing the class and talking to a girl. She was in her early 20s, and she was exploring her church history. She knew she was Lutheran, but she didn't, because her family talked about being Lutheran. So she was coming to church. And I remember asking, "Are you baptized?" And her response was, "I don't know. My grandmother had died before she could tell me." Because a lot of times the grandmothers would do it. And it was such a strange thought and a strange thing to hear, because we live in a world where it's much easier and open to do that. So, okay, I've taken up Hayden's time.
Thanks very much for sharing. So we're going to transition to Hayden. Hayden, jump right in. Tell us about your service and the way that you uphold lives.
Okay, great. Well, I'll just give a short background of how I became a missionary, since there's college students on the call, even though you all chose the wrong Concordia, but it's okay. I'm just kidding. They're all great. But yes, I graduated from Concordia, Nebraska just a year ago. So I'm done with my freshman year of life. How exciting. And while I was in college, I went on 2 short-term trips to Sierra Leone, Africa, with the LCMS Mercy medical trips. And then I also had a 6-week teaching experience in China. And so I studied ESL and theology, and I had those 3 experiences, which really opened my eyes to international work and what God is doing all over the world. And so I became very interested in becoming a missionary after college. And my original vision was maybe to go to Africa, because I had, even though it was short term, served there previously. And when the time came to, kind of be appointed or be extended the position, they said, "Would you consider the Czech Republic?" And I was like, "The Czech who?" The Czech Republic. I do not know much about that. But so it was a surprise, and I had never been to Europe before, so all new things, but I was very excited to come and to join the work that is being done here. So what I do is mainly teach English in a lot of different capacities. So here in the Czech Republic, I teach in 2 different schools, 2 different local schools, and I also run 2 different English groups, and I help out at youth events and different English-related events that take place during the semester and during the weeks. And so that is what I do here, and I love it. I teach in the schools junior high kids, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. And I had never worked with that age group before, really. And it's very exciting. They keep me on my toes. One day they will be so excited to learn and have so much to say. And the next day they're kind of bummed out about life and leave me alone. I don't want to teach English, or I don't want to learn English. So it is fun to work with them, and very up and down sometimes. And they have gotten me into trouble recently because I will ask them to teach me Czech words or Czech phrases to help me out in my daily life. I'll say, how do you say this? If I need help in the train or something like this, how would I ask somebody? And I learned recently that one of the phrases they taught me is very bad. So I cannot trust them as much as I thought I could, but that is okay. They like to keep me on my toes and keep me guessing. So I have a lot of fun with them. I also have an English group with another missionary here in the town where I live, and then an English group in a town that's about 30 minutes away by train. And so I really enjoy those connections too, and working with the students there. So the Czech Republic the population is about 10 million people, and it's about 80% agnostic, atheistic, and so a very spiritually dark place. It is no longer a communist country, of course, but it was at one time, and those influences on religion and the way that people view religion and faith still have a large impact on people's viewpoints and on how they approach life. And so the youth that I work with, because in the schools and church and youth group, it's mostly the youth population that I am working with. And they really struggle because for a lot of them, their parents do not support them in their exploration of faith or attending church. I spoke with some students a few weeks ago at youth group who shared that their parents will let them go either to youth group or to the church service on Sunday, but they are not allowed to go to both each weekend because it's seen as too much religion, and the parents are worried that they're going off that path too strongly. And so they kind of have to choose, do I want to go to youth group or do I want to go to the church service on Sunday? So it's very hard for the youth to not have that support of their parents in their home. And then of course, just in general, the youth who attend church and who have that faith, they are a small minority. So they don't have that support from their parents or from their home, but also amongst their peers. And at the school, they face a lot of being made fun of and a lot of just day-to-day persecution of, oh, that's silly, why are you even talking about that or pursuing that? That is all just things that are not worth your time. And so it's very interesting to work with the youth and to hear their stories and their backgrounds and to be able to encourage them and work with them in the youth group and in the schools. One of the schools I teach at is a Christian school, or the teachers, and it's supported by the church. But a lot of the kids who attend do not go to church, do not believe, and they come from non-Christian backgrounds. And then the other school that I teach at is a public school. And so that particularly, most of the kids, I would say yes, almost all of them do not come from that background. And so being able to teach English and just build relationships with them opens doors for me to share more about myself and my own faith and my own beliefs and start to have those conversations. So it's actually pretty easy kind of to put that out there or get that conversation started because, people ask, you're from America and you came to the Czech Republic. I mean, that is Czech people's view. They're like, wow, you're from America and that's so cool. Why in the world would you come to the Czech Republic? Like, nobody knows about us. We're just this small little country. And so right away I can, put that information out there and say, oh yes, well, I came to be a missionary and to work with the churches. Because a question that I get asked a lot is, are we allowed to freely, talk about faith or talk about religion? And maybe in China, when I had that experience, we had to be a lot more careful about what we said and around who, but here we can talk freely and openly. And so just people asking me why I have come, it's like, I have come to be a missionary. And a lot of times there's not a follow-up on that right away. But as I get to know students and talk with them more, they will question me more. Okay, like missionary, what does that mean? And so why are you working with the churches, or why is that important to you? And so it is great to talk with youth and work with them and be able to have those further conversations with them. The other main thing that I do is that I also work in some capacity with the Riga Lutheran Academy. I am not a theological educator, but I do work with about 10 of the men studying to become pastors or just continuing on in their own education and growth. And I work with them and teach them English, tutor them one-on-one. We practice conversational English, and that has been such a blessing. It is so much fun. I really, really enjoy it, working with these men. I meet with each of them one-on-one, so it's very personal. Some of them, we work a lot on grammar and different English components like that. Some of them, it's more conversational, but it has just been great to work with them this semester and to really get to know them and hear about their own cultures and their own backgrounds and the things that they face and the persecutions and the different things that their churches struggle with within their own countries. And then as I get to know them more, a lot of them have opened up to me and shared things about their personal lives. And so it's just been a great opportunity to get to know them and walk alongside them and help them out in this way as they study to become pastors, which is great. And yes, I was also able to attend the intensive in Latvia and meet some of them face to face, which was great. Pastor Davis, that Pastor Lawson pointed out, I meet with him twice a week, and he is just the best. He is so fun and so full of joy, and he is very blunt. He tells me things as it is. So one story is that one of the lessons we had was conversational, and so we were talking about beauty. I had different discussion questions prepared about beauty, and he said, I think that everybody should always, wake up and try to look their best. And that night I had not slept well for whatever reason. And so maybe I was not looking my best that morning. And he said, my tutor, like you yesterday at our lesson, you looked beautiful, you looked ready for the day, and today not so much. And I was like, oh, thank you so much for pointing that out. So, but no, he is great. And he is very dedicated. I mean, all the men are so dedicated. I'll be on a Zoom call with Pastor Davis, and he'll say, oh, my tutor, I'm so sorry, but he teaches at a school. So he'll say, I'm so sorry, but one of the students has passed out, and I will just be right back. I'm so sorry. And then he was gone for maybe 2 minutes tops. And he came back on the call and he said, I'm so sorry. They passed out, but I loaded her on the ambulance. So now I'm back. Let's keep learning. And I was like, it's okay. Like, is everything okay? Are you sure you don't need to take a few more minutes? And so, yes, all the students are very dedicated and very, very great to work with and learn from. I mean, they're all studying to become pastors, and they have all this theological knowledge and their own ministries that they do in their countries. And so I just feel like I am learning so much from them, even as I try to help them with their English. The other question that I was going to talk about is the impact of the Ukrainian and Russian conflict here in the Czech Republic. And so we have seen a large influx of refugees who have come to the Czech Republic or who are passing through. Kind of when the conflict first started, we kind of knew that people were going to be coming, but there was just this pause where people weren't coming quite yet. And then all of a sudden there were trains and trains of people passing through or finding somewhere to stay and settle within the area. The town where I live is right on the border of Poland, but the town where I live specifically is pretty small and there is not a lot of job opportunities. So most of the people, the Ukrainian refugees we saw and worked with, kind of just passed through or stayed temporarily, but we do have refugees in the area, and the schools that I teach at, we have Ukrainian students now and Ukrainians who are attending our churches and who are just kind of part of our daily life now. When I would say back in April, well, maybe March, I think, when there was quite a large influx, I was able to go a couple of times to Poland and work at a turnaround home, I guess you would call it, just this place where the refugees were coming to on the bus, and then they would have a maximum of 3 days to stay there and figure out where they were going next. And so while the leaders and while other people worked with the parents and the moms, I mean, of course, it's mostly women, while they worked with them to figure out which country they were going to go to, what their living situation needed to be, I was able to just watch the kids, watch the babies and the little kids, and just keep an eye on them while their moms and aunts and grandmas and everyone figured things out. So yes, we have seen the impact of that here, and now it is just kind of part of life, or part of the daily life here. We are getting ready for English camps this summer, and so we have some volunteers coming from America, and we are going to have 5 different English camps taking place in July, and so I'm very excited about that. And it is going to be a great opportunity to bring kids into the church and to build that initial connection. And then hopefully, of course, be able to follow up on those connections and relationships that are formed and continue to invite them to events and to things that are taking place at the church. Sorry, I feel like the time goes so fast. Anytime I talk, it's like, wow. Does anyone have any questions or anything I can expand upon?
I'm sure there's some questions out there. While they're thinking, I have one. So tell me about your recent college grad. What was your major? I know you were interested in mission work when you were at Concordia, Nebraska. What prepared you for what you're doing now?
Okay, yes. Well, my major was theology and ESL, so teaching English as a second language. When I came into college, I started studying theology, and that was, I don't think I had a sure vision right off the bat when I entered, but I loved my theology classes and I knew I just wanted to learn more. And then as I started more seriously considering mission work, I took more ESL classes and then eventually just added that on, so that it could be a tool for me and an asset of something that I could use in the mission field. But I had, in my theology classes and in some mission courses I took, I had many professors who were very influential to me in my pursuit of mission work and just church work in general.
Good. What other questions are there?
So would you consider doing the distance program with the deaconess stuff, or do you just want to stick with what you have?
I'm not sure. I get asked if I would like to be a deaconess a lot. And I think that deaconess ministry is great. I mean, obviously it's great that you are doing it and work really until kind of the end of college. because I didn't have one in my church or growing up, and so I did not know much about it. I would say for right now that I am happy in the role that I have. I would love to study theology more, though, in some capacity, and to keep learning. So I would not say that it's, a for sure no, or I will never be a deaconess. But I think for right now that I am happy in my role and happy to keep exploring and learning.
So when you have these English camps, and you said that people come and they participate in them, where do they come from and how do they sign up to participate in them?
Yes, the participants come from neighboring villages and towns. And so the individual congregations reach out to people, advertise it in the schools, kind of work with the connections that they have to bring kids in. So yes, it's in the neighboring villages and towns. And then at the end of the week, the end of the week of camp, they will invite the parents to come to kind of a closing program. And so kind of, following up on the relationships that were formed during the week and extending that to the parents.
Excellent. What are the questions you guys have?
Do they have a English requirement in the schools in the Czech Republic?
Yes, they start studying English at an early age, and then going into high school, like the high school age, they have to take an English exam, and that kind of is one of the components that, what am I trying to say? That's one of the components that determines which high school that they get into for further study.
So one of the questions down below is, do you have a relationship with any other missionaries in the Czech Republic? Do you know any? Do you work closely with them, or?
Yes, for starters, I live with one, Chelsea Irwin. She is a missionary here in the Czech Republic, so I live with her. We are roommates. Ben and Becca Helge are in Havishov, which is about 20 minutes away by train, and Ben is my direct supervisor. But even beyond the supervisor relationship, we have meals together a lot and check-in and phone calls. And so I have a good relationship with them as well. I also know of Cindy Brecky, who is in Prague, and I just met her because I came here a few days before Christmas. So I have been here for only 5 months, so I'm still very new. And I met Cindy right when I arrived, and then she went to the States for home service. So I don't know her very well yet, but she is coming back next month. And so over the course of the next year, I am sure that I will interact with her more as well.
Have you gotten to go to Germany yet and meet any of the missionaries there?
No, I have not. I have not been to Germany. I have met Rachel Krause and Kim.
Yeah, Kim.
You know them? Okay, yes. They were in Prague, like when I first arrived. It was all very confusing. I arrived in the Czech Republic, and there were like 5 people that were like, "Oh, I'm so happy to meet you," and then they all left. And I haven't seen them since, but I did meet them. They were in Prague when I first came, but I have not been to see them yet in their work and in Germany. But I am hoping that is on my bucket list for the next year.
Good.
You will have to send me suggestions or something of places.
Yeah, I would definitely.
I appreciate your comments on, the refugees and the changes that have taken place. Just in general, you mentioned that you were working in a place where there was a lot of darkness, right? And I know, so I did a few weeks of service in Slovakia and then also in Russia during college, and I remember feeling that when I was in St. Petersburg, kind of that weight, that darkness that you were talking about. And so how do you, and maybe it's for both of you, how do you combat that? How do you as missionaries remain the light, right? How do you remain able to share the joy and the hope that we have in Christ when there are so many around you who either don't know or who may be working in opposition?
I would say for me that before I left the States, I set up a kind of support group, and that has been very important for me. And having that for the past few months has just been something that I really, really rely on and really could not go without. So when I went through training to become a missionary, one of the points that they made is, there's a lot that happens as a missionary and in your life and things that you're going to struggle with, but you don't necessarily want to or should maybe share that with everyone, with your whole network or in your newsletter, or, talk to your parents and then they'll get scared and, oh no, she's sad, we need to help, and then they'll just get stressed out and it's a bad situation. So they really encouraged having people that you can talk to and just talk through things with, and people that will be able to be there for you kind of from the outside, but not get very stressed out about it or emotional or things like that. So anyway, that was a long way of saying that I have 3 pastors from back in the States who are kind of my support group, and I meet with each of them one-on-one once a month. And they don't know each other. They're not all aware that the 3 of them are my group, but individually I reached out to them and set up a monthly meeting time. And so basically once a week, every other week, I have someone to talk to, somebody who prays with me and follows up with me on things I've mentioned in past weeks. And so that has been very important for me, and very great to have people that I can talk to and, cry to and kind of unload, and then they are able to pour back into me and encourage me. And then that really strengthens me for the coming week.
I just want to say, I'm not alone. I'm here with my family. So I've always had that connection as I was here. And for me, though, I had the Russian Church with a connection with them, because I was living with them, being a part of with them. I still talk to them. So I always had that connection with them. So I never had any to say, was I alone or was I didn't have that type of experience because of the environment that I was in.
All right, any other final questions? I really appreciate both of you coming and sharing, and your honesty and the opportunity to learn about the variety, right? The many ways that you can serve and uphold lives overseas, and many of them are the same ways we can serve and uphold lives here, right, in America. But certainly there is a component to mission work that is very different from being here on the States. And Hayden, I appreciate again, we have people that are listening to the podcast that are young and maybe thinking about that. And should I do that? Should I not? I think when you're single, that might be have a different look, right? And what a wonderful aspect. Even when you're married, right? You and your family can do that work together. So that's exciting to see as well. So
I would is it okay if I say one more thing?
Yeah.
Okay, just talking, because a question that I do get asked a lot is, what is it like to be single? Or, oh, you're so brave for being single and leaving the States and all of this. So I would just say to the college students who are on the call, and maybe you're all, no, I've been married for 5 years. This is not a problem for me. But, or for anybody listening, it's hard after college to just you're away from your friends all of a sudden, and you just kind of have to figure out your adult life, I guess, away from your Concordia bubble, which is so great. But I would say just to not be scared. I think that sometimes, like, being single, people think too much about that, or like, oh, can I handle this? Should I do this because I'm single and I'm alone? But, of course, you don't have a spouse, but I really have such a great support group and a great network. And if you are that single person considering mission work, I would just, I would say that you can do it. God is with you. You have great people in your life and who are going to support you and walk with you. So I would not be too scared about it.
Thank you. That is a great message to end on. The last thing I just want to ask is if we can support your ministry, where and how we can do that. And then that way our listeners can support you guys as well. So is the best way to go to the LCMS website and do it through there, or do you guys have other ways?
For me, the LCMS website has been the best. I wasn't on, when I was in Russia, I wasn't on some things just because you can't be a missionary proselytizing in Russia. And the way it translates, it doesn't, into Russian missionary, it means proselytizing. There's no in Russian. So that's why I was always a theological educator. So the easiest is best to do just to the LCMS. Is it lcms.org/Lawson? I think is mine.
And is there anything that, Hayden, would you say that was the best for you as well?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And finally, is there anything we can pray for you for?
I would say as for us, just as we go through this transition, having to leave and now reestablish, and I've got home service coming up too soon, so I'm getting ready to do that, and I've got visa applications now for Latvia, going through that process. So
How about you, Hayden?
I would just say for continued settling in, I've been here for 5 months, but still getting settled in and building new relationships.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, for having a fantastic presentation on our last Chats for Life. Thank you for being here, and we hope to see you in the fall.
Thanks for joining us for today's life topic. Check out whyforlife.org or email Michelle at whyforlife.org to find out how and when you can go live with us at our next Chats for Life session. Or join us next time, right here at Why for Life Podcasts, where youth learn how to be gospel-motivated voices for life.